Welcome to the Cheating Wife Stories channel. There is nothing between us. I whisper those words to myself as I set my house key on the nightstand. It's late, almost midnight. The bedroom lamp casts a weak glow, and the key clinks against the smooth surface. I don't bother turning around to check if she's awake or pretending. The rustle of sheets tells me Emily's there, on her side of the bed. Eyes closed, maybe. Everything feels hollow, as if the walls themselves are holding their breath, waiting for an explosion that never quite happens. This moment, me placing that key so deliberately, is a reminder, a silent announcement that I came home once again, but not in the way I used to. Not with a warm kiss, not with an easy laugh. I set the key down like a statement, or perhaps a warning. My old man used to say, "A house key is the biggest promise you can give." I remember nodding back then, thinking I understood. Now, I truly get it. That key on the nightstand used to symbolize ownership, security, love. Tonight, it symbolizes something else. The slow exit from a life built on sinking sand. I turn away from Emily, from her perfume in the air, too flowery, too sweet. For a moment, I recall the taste of her lipstick on the rim of her coffee cup, the same cup I started drinking from weeks ago. Not for the water, not for hydration, but to see if it would burn my mouth the way her betrayal burned my heart. And it did. I guess a man can get used to bitter water if he tells himself he deserves it. "Mike," she says, softly, almost inaudible. I stiffen, but don't answer. My name on her lips feels like a spark in a powder keg. I might explode if I respond, so I stay silent. She shifts in bed, the blanket sliding against her body. For a second, in the corner of my eye, I see her silhouette, slender, covered partly by sheets, hair spread on the pillow. Once upon a time, that sight would fill me with warmth. I used to watch her sleep, thinking how lucky I was. Now, all I feel is a hollow ache. I glance at the key one last time before switching off the lamp. Darkness. Shock. That's how all of this started, I suppose. Real, breath-stealing shock. We'd been married for nearly 10 years. Nothing was perfect, sure, but I never imagined discovering that my son, the very child who looks at me with trust in his eyes, wasn't mine in the most fundamental biological sense. That day the mail arrived, I was in the driveway, taking out the trash. We'd done one of those online DNA kits for fun. Well, Emily had. It was her idea, something about wanting to trace our son's heritage. She'd insisted, telling me how it might be a bonding experience, how it could reveal interesting facts about his ancestry. I should have seen the tension in her eyes then. But I was naive, or maybe just willfully blind. So the package arrived with the results. I happened to be there first, rummaging through the envelopes. Bills, junk mail, and that DNA report. She stepped outside with a forced smile, took the letter from my hand, and retreated into the house. My gut twisted, but I ignored it. 15 minutes later, I heard a thud, like someone collapsing against furniture. I rushed in, found her in the kitchen. Her face had gone pale, eyes wide, lips trembling. The paper in her hand shook so violently, I thought she might rip it in half. "Mike," she stammered, "these results." I didn't let her finish. I quietly took the report from her. My gaze caught a few lines. Probability of paternity, 0%. My knees almost gave out. Emily's eyes flooded with tears that seemed to well up from some subterranean reservoir of guilt. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. And for a moment, everything froze. The air, my heartbeat, her tears suspended in midair, it seemed. Then I felt this slow, boiling sensation in my chest. A kind of numb rage. My mind raced back through the years. The night our son was conceived, the hospital visits, the baby shower, how she always joked he had my grumpy eyebrows. Except now, I realized I'd been living someone else's fatherhood all this time. But even then, I said nothing. I just walked away, ignoring her sobs. ignoring the phone that started ringing in the background. The next day, I didn't throw her out, didn't scream, didn't demand an explanation. I spoke as little as possible. If I had unleashed what churned inside me, I would have set the whole world on fire. In the following days, I learned more. My sister admitted she'd seen Emily with a man downtown weeks ago. A bus driver, she said, wearing cheap cologne. That kind of guy. She'd noticed them talking near the depot, arms touching, leaning in intimately. She'd seen them laugh, like they shared a secret that no one else could understand. I guess that's exactly what they had. Who was he? Ray. That's all I knew at first. She'd called him Ray in text messages I found later. Yeah, I stooped to reading them on her phone when she was in the shower. The content of those messages made my hands shake. They weren't graphic, but the subtext was unmistakable. They'd met for coffee, then dinner, then other things. Her words, not mine. I confronted her one night, not with direct questions but with subtle jabs. I asked, "Have you been taking the bus more often?" Her eyes darted away. She said, "Once or twice, with a friend." I wanted to say, "Tell me honestly," but something in me held back. Maybe I still hoped she'd volunteer the truth on her own. That was the beginning of a long period of silence in our house. And the day after that half-hearted conversation, I grabbed her water cup when she left it on the kitchen table, took a sip, let the rim press against my lips. It wasn't normal water. It tasted like betrayal, tinted with the mint she always chewed, tinted with the ghost of secrets unspoken. Or maybe that was all in my head. Back when we first met, I was an operations manager in training at a logistics firm, and Emily worked at a front desk at a corporate events company. We were introduced through a mutual friend at a bar. She smiled, and I saw my entire future reflected in her eyes. I remember leaning over the small table, mesmerized by her laughter. We danced that night to an old rock tune. I was never much of a dancer, but with her, I felt unstoppable. We married in a small ceremony, just close family. I recall the day clearly. The grass was lush and green, the sun bright but not scorching. She wore a simple white gown that hugged her figure, and I told her she was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. That moment, everything felt possible. After the reception, we sat in a quiet corner, still in our wedding clothes, talking about the life we would build. Kids, a house, maybe a dog. We never got a dog, but we did get a child. I remember thinking how miraculous that was, our love creating a whole new person. Now that miracle feels like a trick played on me. Still, my love for that boy remains real. He's an innocent kid. I can't blame him for any of this. The fatherly instincts don't just vanish. They clash with the knowledge that I was never truly his father in the genetic sense, and that contradiction gnaws at me like a slow, relentless termite. The day I decided to come home late on purpose, I remember driving aimlessly after work. I stopped by a department store, bought some random items I didn't need. A new tie, cologne and a scent I normally wouldn't wear. I stuffed the receipt in my coat pocket, made sure it was easy to find. Part of me felt childish doing this, but another part, the furious and humiliated part, wanted her to feel exactly what I'd been feeling. Suspicion, jealousy, that slow poison that trickles into your veins day by day. When I stepped through the door, she was in the living room, eyes flicking from the clock to me. "You're late," she murmured, trying to sound casual. But I caught the edge in her voice. "Got stuck at the office," I lied, heading straight for the bedroom. She followed me with her gaze, but I offered no further explanation. Later that night, I left my coat draped over a chair in the dining area, the receipt peeking out. She found it. I heard her footsteps approach, the soft crackle of the small paper in her hand. She didn't say anything right then, but the tension in the room thickened. Her mind was doubtless swirling with questions. Why a new tie? Why that brand of cologne? Why not mention it to her? She went to bed early, while I lingered, pouring a whiskey I didn't even want. I stared at that whiskey glass for a good hour, thinking about how twisted everything had become. The more I drank, the more I imagined her with Ray. I could almost see them together, hidden away in some cheap motel room, her nails running down his back. My stomach churned, and a dull ache spread through my chest. Shortly afterward, I confronted Emily more directly, goaded her, really. One evening, she caught me leaving the house again after dinner, a casual jacket on, the new cologne filling the air. "Going somewhere?" she asked, voice tight. "Out," I said curtly. "With who?" I paused in the doorway, turned to face her. "Tell me honestly," I said, flipping the demand back at her. "Why do you need to know?" She clenched her fists. "I'm your wife. I deserve to know if—" I cut her off by staring her straight in the eyes. I wanted her to recall all the times she'd hidden details from me, all the nights she came home late or smelled of a cologne that wasn't mine, all the alibis that never quite added up. She gave me a frantic look, like she was trying to read my mind, but I just walked out. No explanation, no apology. Let her wonder. Let her heart pound the same anxious rhythm mine had been pounding for weeks. Did I feel guilty? Not really. Or maybe yes, in some corner of my soul that recognized cruelty. But the humiliation she inflicted on me demanded payback. My father always preached about forgiveness. I used to believe in it. But sometimes the desire for vengeance overpowers any sense of mercy. We rarely spoke after that. She tiptoed around the house, fixating on small tasks, as though scrubbing the kitchen sink or reorganizing the pantry could wash away her guilt. Meanwhile, I found reasons to stay out. Late meetings that weren't real, errands that led nowhere. In truth, I was driving, thinking, sometimes parking in an empty lot to stare at the stars. One night, drifting alone in my car, I found myself near the bus depot downtown. I glanced at the rows of vehicles, headlights flickering in the distance. A man leaned against a minibus, smoking a cigarette. Maybe it was him, maybe not. But in my mind's eye, I saw them again, in each other's arms, laughing, swapping secrets. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. A memory flooded back, an image from the days before we were married. Emily and I dancing. She was wearing this little black dress, hugging me like I was her entire world. In that memory, her laughter was so pure. Now, that same laughter might have belonged to someone else. The recollection felt like a knife in my chest. I drove home around midnight. She was waiting, pacing in the living room. When I opened the door, she turned, eyes rimmed with tears and fury. "Where were you?" she asked, her voice shaking. I tossed my keys on the table. "Does it matter?" "Yes, it matters." I brushed past her, heading toward the kitchen. I saw my reflection in the window. Tired eyes, clenched jaw, a man halfway lost. She followed. "Mike, tell me what's going on," she pleaded. I grabbed a glass, filled it with water, then drank slowly, savoring the bitterness that had nothing to do with the water itself. Her eyes followed every movement of my lips against that rim. Finally, I set the glass down. "You already know," I said, my voice hoarse. Her cheeks flamed red. "I don't know anything," she insisted. The corner of my mouth twisted, a half-smile dripping with sarcasm. "You must be the only one, then." She made a desperate noise, something between a sob and a gasp, and stormed away. I heard the bedroom door slam. For a moment, I contemplated going after her, forcing the confrontation. But anger pulsed inside me, and I wanted her to be the one waiting, the one feeling uncertain. So I left the house again, driving around aimlessly for hours until I finally returned to slip into bed near dawn. Flashbacks come at the most inconvenient times. The day after that argument, I was at work, sifting through spreadsheets, trying to focus on supply chain deadlines. But my mind kept drifting to the early days with Emily. That radiant smile, when she first told me she was pregnant, how we celebrated with cheap champagne, toasted to our future as parents. I recall how I pressed my palm against her belly, marveling at the life growing inside. I remember wiping away tears of joy from her face. That memory stabs me now. During my lunch break, I just sat in my car, head bowed, thinking about how to move forward. Divorce, shouting match, a civilized, let's talk about this scenario. None of it felt right. I was paralyzed by betrayal, by love, by old habit. And beneath all the layers of anger, I realized something horrifying. I still loved her enough that the idea of discarding our marriage made me nauseous. That was a fresh wave of humiliation, to know I was so deeply attached to the very person who stabbed me in the back. When I got home that evening, she was perched on the couch, trembling. The TV was on but muted. I'd been ignoring her for days, but I could see she was at her breaking point. Something dark and heavy churned in the air between us. She stood as soon as I walked in. "Mike, I can't do this anymore." I swallowed hard. Do what? Live like this, pretending. Neither of us is talking. Everything's falling apart. I crossed my arms. "And whose fault is that?" Her lips quivered. For a second, I saw the younger Emily, the one who used to get teary-eyed if we argued about something stupid, like which movie to watch. But now, it was more than just tears. It was a heartbreak so deep I could taste it on the air. "Tell me honestly," I said. "You want to fix this, or do you want to run?" She blinked, tears slipping down her cheeks. I don't know." "Answer me," I insisted, stepping closer. "Be direct for once." Her eyes flickered with guilt and sorrow. "Mike, I regret everything. I do. Ray, was a mistake. I felt lonely. You were working so much, and then we drifted." My mouth twisted into a bitter line. "So you found comfort in someone else's bed, that it?" Her face contorted in pain, and she nodded, almost imperceptibly. "I'm sorry." That admission, quiet as it was, slammed into me like a train. I felt my stomach drop. I wanted to lash out, wanted to break something, but I just stood there, fists clenched at my sides, a trembling statue. "That's it," I managed, voice cracking. "That's all you have to say." She wiped her tears. "I can't change what happened." "No, you can't." I swallowed hard. "But you changed everything else." I turned away, heading upstairs, leaving her alone with her anguish. Behind me, I heard a stifled sob, a muffled cry, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying old memories like a film reel. Emily's sweet laughter, the smell of her hair in the morning, the way she used to trace her fingers across my chest, telling me how safe she felt. Then a switch would flip, and the images twisted into her with him. That bus driver, somewhere, their bodies tangled. My mind conjured an erotic haze that stabbed me with jealousy. The swirl of conflicting emotions, love, hate, longing, betrayal, was almost too much to bear. At some point near dawn, I left the bed and went to our son's room. He was sound asleep, breathing softly. I stood by the crib he'd long since outgrown, but that we still kept in there, a relic of the past. My eyes stung, thinking about how I'd rocked him in my arms, fed him bottles at 2 a.m., taught him his first word, Dada. Ironically, how many times had I said, "He's just like me"? Now, I felt like a stranger in my own home. I loved this boy more than my own life, but a sliver of poison whispered, "He's not yours, Mike." He never was. I gently tucked the blanket around him, brushing his hair aside. Part of me ached for the day he'd find out, if he ever does. What would that do to him? A wave of protective anger surged through me. I wanted to shield him from the ugliness, from the knowledge that his mother deceived us both. Over the next few days, Emily tried to bridge the gap, offering me small gestures of peace, a coffee in the morning, a warm dinner at night, a hesitant kiss on the cheek. I ignored most of her efforts. The times I did respond, it was with curt politeness. I saw the heartbreak in her face, but I couldn't let go of my fury just yet. Then, unexpectedly, she confronted me one morning in the kitchen, eyes blazing. "Are you cheating on me?" she asked. Her voice was strained, almost desperate. She clearly found more receipts, noticed my late arrivals, smelled that new cologne. For a moment, I felt a surge of triumph. Let her taste that bitter suspicion. But I also felt a tiny shred of pity. Her eyes brimmed with tears, and she looked so small, so lost. "What if I am?" I retorted, crossing my arms. She flinched. "Mike, please. This is crazy. We can't. We should talk." I offered her a cold glare. "Did you talk to me before sleeping with him?" She let out a broken sob. "Just tell me if you are." Instead of answering, I grabbed my jacket and walked out. I heard her shout my name as the door closed. That morning, I stood in the driveway, hands trembling. I realized I had no desire to find someone else. The satisfaction of her fear was fleeting. But I was too raw, too injured to muster compassion. It was a week later when she finally cracked, fully and irrevocably. Late at night, I came home. She was in the living room, tears staining her cheeks, suitcases partially packed beside her. I blinked, unsure what to say. She rose as I entered. "I'm going," she announced. Her voice wavered, but the resolve was there. "I can't live with your silence, your anger, my what?" I snapped. "My revenge." She swallowed, nodding slowly. "Yes, the quiet kind, the one that seeps into every room. It's killing me." I stared at her, at the suitcases. My heart pounded painfully against my ribs. "So, you're leaving because you can't stand that I won't pretend everything's normal? Because I won't let you off the hook?" She glared, tears reflecting the lamp's dim light. "I made a terrible mistake. I've told you I'm sorry. I've pleaded with you to talk, but all you do is shut me out." "You shut me out first," I said, voice low. She wiped a tear from her cheek. "I'll be at my mother's. I need space. Maybe you do too." That final blow of logic stirred my anger, but also sadness. My hands clenched into fists. I wanted to shout, to hold her back, to push her away. Everything at once. Instead, I did nothing. I let her walk by, dragging the suitcases. She paused at the door, glancing back at me, maybe hoping I'd say something to change her mind. But I just stood there, a statue carved from heartbreak. When the door slammed, the silence that followed was louder than any scream. 3 days passed. She sent texts. "We need to talk. Can we meet for coffee? Have you thought about counseling?" I ignored them all. My sister came by, worried about me. She told me that Emily had taken our son to her mother's place, that everyone was concerned for him. I just stared out the window, arms crossed. At night, I slept fitfully, tossing and turning in our bed that felt too big, too empty. The house was suffocatingly quiet. I found myself going through the motions of daily life like a ghost. Wake up, go to work, come home, stare at the walls. Sometimes I'd stand in the kitchen, pick up Emily's cup, she'd left one behind, and sip water out of it. The bitterness still clung to the rim, or maybe that was my imagination. A swirl of memories haunted me. Emily's laughter, her betrayal, my son's trusting eyes. At times, I felt sick to my stomach, guilt mixing with heartbreak, mixing with fury. Why did I still love her? Why couldn't I release that bond? My father's words came back to me. There's a fine line between fighting for something you believe in and letting yourself be destroyed. I wondered which side of that line I was on. On the 4th day, the text came. "We need to finalize custody. The lawyers say it's best to establish an arrangement for our son." My chest constricted at the thought, but I responded with a single word. "Okay." We arranged to meet at a small diner halfway between her mother's place and our house. I arrived first, the overhead bell chiming when I walked in. The smell of frying bacon and stale coffee filled the air. I slid into a booth, heart pounding. 5 minutes later, Emily walked in. She spotted me, gave a tentative nod, and sat across from me. Her face was pale, eyes red-rimmed. She looked exhausted, thinner than before. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "How are you?" A wave of anger coursed through me. I wanted to say, "Terrible, thanks for asking," but I forced myself to remain calm. "I'm here," I said, which was all I could manage. She sighed, looking down at her hands. I noticed she wasn't wearing her wedding ring anymore. A fresh stab of pain pierced my chest. "The lawyers," she began hesitantly, "they want to know if you want partial custody or if—" She paused, swallowing. "If you prefer no custody at all." Silence. The waitress stopped by, dropping off water. She asked if we wanted anything else, and we both shook our heads. After she left, I glared at Emily. "He's my son," I growled. She flinched. "Yes, but biologically." My fist hit the table, rattling the water glasses. "Don't you dare finish that sentence." Tears welled up in her eyes. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I exhaled, trying to steady my voice. "I want partial custody. You think I can just walk away from him? I've raised him his whole life. Biology doesn't change that." A tear slipped down her cheek. "I wasn't sure, after you found out." "I love that boy," I said, my voice raw. "I don't care whose DNA he has." She pressed her lips together, nodding, tears falling freely now. For a moment, the old sympathy in me surfaced. I remembered the way I used to hold her whenever she cried, whispering that everything would be okay. This time, I just watched. "Mike," she whispered, voice trembling. "I know I don't deserve to ask, but do you think, someday, you could forgive me?" I stared at her. Part of me wanted to say yes, part wanted to say never. In the end, I didn't respond. I stood up, threw some bills on the table, and walked out without looking back. The smell of bacon and coffee followed me, and I heard that overhead bell chime as the door swung shut. Viscosity. That's the only word I can use to describe the next few weeks. Time felt thick, as though I was wading through mental molasses. Each day bowled into the next, the same hollow routine repeating itself. Work, empty house, whiskey, restless sleep. I tried to pick up old hobbies, golf, fixing up the backyard. But everything felt pointless. Friends reached out, but I avoided them. What would I say? That my wife cheated, that my kid isn't mine, that I can't stand the sight of my own reflection in the mirror. My pride couldn't handle that conversation. Every so often, I'd get a text from Emily. "We need to sign some papers. Our son misses you. He asks about you every night." Those words stabbed me the hardest. I missed him too, more than anything. But I wasn't ready to face him, or to figure out how to parent him alone on weekends. It all felt so complicated, so heartbreakingly surreal. Then, an unexpected phone call from my mother. She rarely meddled in my affairs, but apparently my sister had told her everything. Her voice was gentle yet firm on the other end of the line. "Michael, come see me," she said. "I know you're hurting." I drove to Ohio that weekend, spent a day in my childhood home. Sitting at my mother's kitchen table, I recalled simpler times. But even there, the betrayal followed me like a shadow. I told her everything in halting sentences. She listened without judgment, pressing a cup of tea into my hands, occasionally reaching over to squeeze my arm. "You can't carry this hatred forever," she said. "It'll destroy you." "What about her?" I fired back, voice shaking. "She destroyed me." She gave me a sad, knowing look. "She wounded you, yes, but you're still breathing. And you still have your son." I shook my head. "It's not that simple, Ma." Her eyes softened. "It never is." That was all she said, but I felt something shift inside me. A tiny seed of acceptance, or maybe just resignation. A month later, I agreed to meet my son at the park for an afternoon. Emily was present, off to the side, letting me take the lead. My boy ran to me, arms wide. face lit up with joy. My heart nearly burst with conflicting emotions: love, pain, guilt, longing. I knelt down and hugged him, fighting back tears. "Daddy, where have you been?" he asked in his bright, innocent voice. I forced a smile. "Just busy, buddy. But I'm here now." We spent a couple of hours on the swings, playing catch, eating ice cream from a stand. Emily watched from a bench, her expression sorrowful, but relieved to see us together. I tried to ignore her. Focus on him, because in that moment, he was the only thing that mattered. After a while, we parted ways. Emily walked him to her car, while I stood by mine. She glanced back at me once, something like hope flickering across her features. I managed a nod and left. The entire drive home, I felt emotionally raw, as though a bandage had been ripped from a gaping wound. Time crawled by. Paperwork for custody was processed. Our official separation loomed. Yet each night, I found myself haunted by memories of Emily, by the question of whether I could ever let go, or whether I even wanted to. The contradictory pangs of anger and longing were driving me crazy. Eventually, I decided to confront Ray. A dangerous idea, maybe, but I needed to see the man who shattered my life from the inside. I found him one evening near the depot. I recognized the uniform shirt, the minibus behind him, the strong, cheap cologne. Stepping out of my car, I approached him. My heart hammered like a war drum. He noticed me, frowned, flicking away a cigarette. "Can I help you?" I stared at him, scanning his face. Tanned skin, short hair, a slight scar over his eyebrow. This was the man who took my wife to bed, who fathered my child without me knowing. My jaw tightened, but I swallowed the bile in my throat. "You're Ray, right?" He eyed me warily. "Who's asking?" I stepped closer, until we were mere feet apart. Emily's husband. His face went pale, then flushed. I saw him tense, maybe expecting me to swing. For a second, I actually considered it, knocking him to the ground, making him bleed. But I kept my fists down. He stammered, "Look, man, I didn't. I mean, it just happened. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to go so far." I stared into his eyes, searching for a flicker of remorse. "You knew she was married." He shifted from foot to foot. "Yeah, I did." I let out a shaky breath, a mixture of anger and despair. "You wrecked my life. You made me question everything." He swallowed. "I'm sorry. But she came to me. And it's not. We aren't together now." My chest tightened. Hearing him say, "She came to me," sliced open a fresh wound. I took a moment, glancing around the empty lot. "You still see her?" He shook his head. "No. After everything blew up, she cut it off. I guess she realized it was a mistake." I said nothing for a few seconds. Then I locked eyes with him. "The boy," I managed, my voice trembling. "Do you know? Do you realize?" His face fell. "I know. But she said she wasn't sure at first." He rubbed the back of his neck, eyes dropping to the concrete. "When she told me about him, it was complicated." My vision blurred. I wanted to punch him, to make him feel the agony I'd lived with. But I just clenched my teeth. "You ever try to be a father to him?" He looked up, alarmed. "No, man, I never asked for that. I'm not father material." A bitter laugh escaped me. Neither was I, apparently. A tense silence hung between us, thick with regret and resentment. Finally, he said, "I'm sorry, Mike, I really am." I stared at him for what felt like eternity. Then, surprising even myself, I turned and walked away. No fists thrown, no yelling, just a cold exit, leaving him there with his cigarette stubs and guilt. As I got into my car, I realized my entire body was shaking. I gripped the steering wheel, trying to steady myself. In that moment, I felt a strange clarity. The man who caused so much havoc in my life was just that. A man, flawed, uncertain, probably messed up in his own way. None of it excused what he did, but somehow it made me see that the real betrayal was between Emily and me. The final confrontation came 2 weeks later. Emily requested a meeting, said it was urgent. We agreed on the house we once shared. I arrived first, pacing the living room. The walls felt unfamiliar now. She walked in, pale, clutching a set of papers. I recognized them. Custody agreements, legal documents. I want to finalize this, she said, voice trembling. But before I do, I need to ask if there's any chance. Her question hung in the air. I folded my arms, leaning against the wall. Any chance of what? She took a shaky breath. Reconciliation. My heart twisted painfully. Emily, you broke us. You took that vow and threw it away. She wiped her eyes. I know, and I don't expect miracles. But if you still love me, anger ignited in my chest. I do still love you, and that's the worst part, because I can't live with this. Every time I look at you, all I see is him, your lies, our child that isn't mine. It tears me to pieces. A sob escaped her lips. I ruined everything. I clenched my jaw, staring at the ground. Yes, you did. She sank onto the couch, covering her face with her hands. I can't believe it got this far. I can't believe I've lost you. Despite the fury, a wave of pity surged through me. I stood there, hands shaking, wishing I could unlearn the betrayal, go back to the man who believed in love without question. But that man was gone. The silence in the room was suffocating, broken only by her shaky breaths. I walked over, placed a single hand on her shoulder. She looked up, eyes brimming with tears. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I'm sorry, I said, voice raw. I'm sorry we can't fix this. She nodded, fresh tears rolling down her cheeks. So that's it. I exhaled, nodding. Yeah, that's it. She handed me the custody papers, and I scrawled my name, hand unsteady. With that signature, something inside me snapped into finality. The illusions, the fantasies of healing, everything crumbled. Afterward, we stood in the foyer, the tension thick enough to choke on. She spoke quietly. I'll bring our son by on Thursday, okay? I nodded. Yes. We'll work out a schedule. Her eyes flicked to the old wedding photo on the wall. A smiling, radiant, a bitter, ghostly reflection now. Then she left, shutting the door behind her. I stared at the closed door, feeling a massive emptiness and an unexpected wave of relief. Maybe letting go was the only path left. Maybe it would free me, eventually. I walked to the kitchen, grabbing that same cup she used to drink from. I filled it with cold water, took a sip, and shuddered. It still tasted of memory, of heartbreak, but at least it was real. I'd rather live with the raw ache of truth than the gilded lie of false happiness. The day of reckoning arrived in the form of the final divorce hearing. It was short, procedural. Our lawyers read a few statements. We answered questions. The judge stamped a few papers. Then it was over. My entire married life ended in less than half an hour. She left the courtroom, tears streaking her face. I watched her go, feeling something inside me crack one last time. That was it. The last tie, severed by law. We walked out into the corridor. She paused, turning to me. For a long moment, we just looked at each other, as if memorizing the faces of strangers we once knew intimately. Then, without a word, she turned and disappeared down the hall. Weeks passed in a haze. The official separation brought an odd mixture of pain and liberation. I started seeing my son more regularly on weekends. Each time we parted, I felt the heartbreak of not tucking him in every night, missing those daily moments. But this was the new reality. One evening, after returning him to Emily's mother's house, I drove home in silence. I parked, sat in the driveway, and stared at the dark facade of what was once our shared home. My phone buzzed, my sister checking in, but I didn't answer. I slid out of the car, walked inside. The emptiness felt heavier than usual. Flicking on the light, I looked around. Half the furniture was missing. She'd taken some of it, left the rest. The living room felt like a skeletal echo of what it had been, a place where we once watched movies, shared laughter, argued, made up. I set my keys on the nightstand, exactly where I'd set them that night so many weeks ago. My reflection in the mirror caught my eye. I was thinner, older in a way that had nothing to do with time, more with the weight of heartbreak. Then I noticed, for the first time, that I looked calm. A grim calm, but calm nonetheless. I stepped over to the bed, the sheets half-draped. A single pillow remained. I sank down, letting out a trembling breath. My head fell into my hands, and I let out a groan. Anger, exhaustion, regret all swirling together. Then, finally, tears came. Hot, unstoppable tears, welling up from the deepest part of me. I cried for the man I used to be, for the trust I'd lost, for the child who'd never know a normal family, for the wife I still loved despite everything. When the tears subsided, I laid back against the mattress, eyes on the ceiling. In the hush of that empty house, I felt the old pain surface, a rotted anchor I'd carried too long. I began whispering to myself, to the darkness, letting out truths I'd never spoken. My humiliation, my battered ego, my raw longing for Emily even now. I poured it all out into the silence. Somewhere in that confession, I felt the faintest release, like letting go of a venom that's poisoned me for months. The heartbreak wouldn't vanish overnight, but maybe this was the start. Now, as I approach the final turn in this long road, I think about that key on the nightstand. It's still there, lonely and cold, an emblem of what was once a promise to a woman I cherished beyond measure. At this point, I'm not sure if that promise means anything anymore, or if it's just a relic of a life that got destroyed by secrets and betrayal. But I do know one thing. She's gone, and I'm still standing. My son is out there, still needing me, even if the paperwork calls me a legal guardian rather than father. Blood ties might not bind us, but my love for him remains unshaken. Some nights, I still sip water from her old cup, letting that bitterness slide down my throat as a reminder. Perhaps it's my way of accepting that love and hurt often arrive in the same package. I'm no longer the naive man who believed in forever without question. I'm a man who learned, painfully, that love can be tested, broken, and sometimes, beyond all reason, still quietly endured. A part of me will always love Emily, the way you love an old ghost that haunts the hallways of your memory. But the rest of me knows there's no going back. Our story ended in a short, cold, destructive final, just like that final stamp on the divorce papers. Now, all that remains is to gather the pieces of myself and move on. And in the hush of this house, with the key lying on the nightstand and the night pressing in, I close my eyes and let the darkness have me. Tomorrow, I'll wake up, and maybe, just maybe, the weight will be a fraction lighter. For now, I'm content to lie here in the quiet, breathing through the pain, until the final ember of what we had flickers out.